Welcome to the Matthew Moran podcast. Here you will find a series of in-depth conversations with the world's best nature photographers, filmmakers, conservationists, editors, writers, and publishers. You will get an insight into the lives of creative professionals and industry experts. It is a chance to hear their stories, personal journeys, and how they carve a niche to make a living. The podcast focuses on the role that photography and filmmaking plays in helping to raise awareness about the global plight of species, and despite the depressing statistics, we look for solutions of what we can all do to contribute to conservation. All my guests give up their precious time and are incredibly generous of spirit. So this is my chance to share these conversations with you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. This week, my guest is Megan McCubbin. Megan is a zoologist, presenter, campaigner, and photographer. From a young age, Megan travelled the world searching for and photographing wildlife in remote locations. And she was rewarded early on for her efforts and was the recipient of the Under-12's RSPCA Wildlife Photographer of the Year. Now, photography is just one of Megan's many communication tools. She is a passionate wildlife campaigner and activist. She is also a presenter and has made films tackling issues such as the bear bile farming industry in Vietnam for the BBC. She's reported on plastic pollution and the rise of Extinction Rebellion for Al Jazeera. And this year she made her debut presenting BBC's flagship nature series Springwatch. In this episode, Megan and I talk about all aspects of her work, from photographing and presenting to educating and inspiring people to engage with nature, and how she turns negative energy into a force for good. Please share this episode with your friends, loved ones, people on the fence. Anyone with the slightest interest in nature needs to hear these stories to get them out there, to inform and inspire others to help protect the natural world. Enjoy the show. Megan, thank you so much for coming along and taking part in the podcast. It's funny, actually, I was thinking we had some contact earlier in the year about you coming on, and then there was a bit of a gap. And then I saw you on the front cover of Hello magazine, and I was like, oh no, I've lost my opportunity now. She's too big. She'll never come back.
Well, no, thank you very much for having me on. I know we've been talking about it for a while, so it's good that we can actually make it happen.
Yeah, it's great. And you just got back from a trip to Scotland, right? What were you doing?
Yeah, well, I took a couple, about 10 days out and just kind of went off grid. And myself and my partner went around in a van. Obviously, being the regulations, COVID regulations were put in place whilst we were out there, the stricter guidelines from the government. So we were incredibly careful but you know, we were in the van going around the coast and just kind of looking for wildlife. So we saw some cool eagles, golden eagles. We went out looking for basking sharks one day, but it was I've got a curse of the basking shark because they're top of my list, but I'm never able to see them. Whenever I go looking for them, they're never there. And and the curse was true that day too. So, but we did see some great stuff. It was lovely.
That's great. I kind of like to hear those stories because it means that, you have to work and you have to graft for those wildlife sightings, and it's not just roll up and there it is right in front of you. You've got to make an effort, and it keeps you hungry, right, for going back.
Yeah, it makes it even better when you do get that encounter. It makes all the work worthwhile. And I think if you don't put in the work, then it's not as enjoyable, is it? You've got to really go for it. And it'd be amazing to turn up everywhere and have, the most amazing animals just walk right past you or swim right past you, whatever their form of locomotion might be. But it doesn't work like that. Not at all. You've got to really put in the effort and do the research and figure out where they are and the best times and the weather, so weather dependent. But basking sharks, elusive. Very elusive.
And it's true because I think, when you talk to, friends or, family that don't quite know what goes into it, or people that just watch you, online or on TV, they just see, of course, the edited version. And actually, a lot of it can be really boring. A lot of it is just about being really persistent to try and see all the great stuff that you want to see, to try and capture it on camera. There's a whole journey of frustration, and sometimes it can be really agonizing. And then people see, a great short clip or a video or something online, and like, oh wow, she's got the most amazing lifestyle, he's got the most amazing lifestyle, but it's not always so glamorous, is it?
No, I think what people don't realise is that you probably spent the best part of 10 hours lying in a rainy ditch on some really uncomfortable, jagged stones, or kind of covered in some kind of animal excrement or something. No, it's not easy. And it's like a lot of it is, as I say, agonizing because you're waiting for so long. You're waiting for that moment. If you're filming or taking photos and you want the perfect lighting, sometimes they don't match up. And, occasionally they do and it's magical. But yeah, all the work that goes into kind of getting the shot or just seeing the animal behaving naturally in its environment is yeah, you get to see the highlights in the films and the clips, which is great. But it is a lot of work sometimes, depending on the species, of course. But it can be tricky.
Yeah, and you've been so busy recently, and I would definitely want to come on to talk about a lot of the stuff that you've been up to this year. But for the listeners who don't really know about you and what your work on, I know you work on many different fronts, but it would be good to go back and find out how you got interested in the natural world and what were your motivations and your journey to where you are now.
Yeah, I think so I grew up with Chris Packham. He's my, well, we say stepdad, it's easier. You kind of need a mind map to work out my family. But yeah, so I met Chris when I was 2 and he very much took me in straight away and showed me the natural world, showed me his passion, and I was exposed to wildlife that I would never in a million years ever get the chance to see if I hadn't met him at a really in a really close proximity. So I remember being in a ball pit in a TV studio. I mean, this is in the 90s when this kind of thing was okay, or deemed to be okay. I was sat in a ball pit with a load of meerkats, or there were lion cubs running around, and there were eagle owls sat on the toilet. We had a downstairs bathroom, which was kind of like our little rehabilitation centre. And every time I'd come in from school, I'd run downstairs to see what animal we were rehabilitating that day. So it was a fox, or it was an owl, or anything. So I had quite a lot of wildlife coming in and out of my life. I've had a porcupine obsession because Chris used to take me to our local zoo in Marwell in Southampton, and we'd go and see the porcupines. There was a male called Vicar that I was absolutely obsessed with. So I kind of had a really early introduction to wildlife, and I would get wasps to land on my nose by putting jam on it. I would my birthday parties were all wildlife themed. I'd have moth trap parties, and so for me, growing up in and around animals was just part of it, and I loved every second of it. My bedroom was some kind of weird zoological, I don't know, time warp, I suppose, because it had skulls and I had praying mantises and cockroaches and I had tortoises. I had the fluffy, cutesy stuff too. I had the hamsters and the poodles and the rabbits, but I also had the tarantulas and the kind of
Everything. I'm picturing that scene in Ace Ventura in the early scene when he goes into his flat and he whistles and all these animals come out, raccoons, deers, everything. That was your bedroom. And it's so funny because I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and there's no book that isn't animal themed. It's such an important part of growing up, and kids are engaging with animals through books, through the fluffy toys from such a young age. So it sounded like it was such a dream for you to have that and also be living with the live ones as well in your bedroom.
Yeah, it was I think at the time it was quite normal, but looking back on it, it was incredibly lucky that Chris was able to kind of show me and teach me in that way. And yeah, I think like every child has this innate curiosity about the natural world around them. We're always wondering about how that works, why the animal does that. And, we watched the TV shows. I remember one show that stands out particularly for me as a kid. I don't know if you remember it. It's called Amazing Animals. And it had Henry the gecko. And it had the most amazing theme tune. It was like this kind of box and all these animals would like light up. And this green gecko with purple spots would crawl out and he'd be going on these adventures and meeting all these animals. And I remember just watching that over and over and over when I was about 4 or 5 years old. So we all have these kind of media influences, I suppose, these shows, and I think today's generation it's all Deadly 60 and that kind of thing, wonderful Steve Backshall. And yeah, I think it kind of really helps and to watch those kind of programs. And for me, being able to watch those programs and then go and meet some of those animals, I think it just sparked off a lifelong passion and a drive to help protect the natural world.
That's great. And you didn't have kind of any lulls as you grew older. It just really it kind of gripped you and stayed with you right throughout your teenage years, and then ultimately you ended up studying zoology, and was that how it was through your younger life? It just continued.
Yeah, I think so. I think I had my wobbles, as every teenager does. You're the rebelling stage. I'm not going to do what you expect me to do. I'm going to do something different because why not? I think I went in and did a bit of drama for a bit. But I'm also I'm dyslexic, so I really struggled with science at school. I found it really, really tough. My maths is absolutely horrendous. Even today, my times tables, I really struggle. I can't. Numbers just don't agree with me. So science was something that I couldn't grasp very well. So I think there was a period of time where I kind of wanted to learn more about the natural world. I wanted to get involved with it more, but I wasn't sure if I could. I wasn't sure if I was capable of going and doing, zoology, a science degree, or studying or doing that kind of thing. So I had to kind of work out what I really wanted. And of course, it was always going to be wildlife. There was, nothing that would come close to it, and I just had to work at it.
So how did you get around that? I mean, that's quite a thing, being dyslexic and not, fitting into the system. How did you work it out that you ended up with a zoology degree?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up doing a foundation year, which was really helpful. So I studied at the University of Liverpool, and they did a great biological science foundation year, and there was a lot of support there. I grew up in a period of time when there's a lot of support available.
Yeah.
If it was needed. And early on, I did need quite a lot of support. I'd have specific lessons, I think 3 or 4 times a week to help with reading and writing, because I was really behind and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's just a process. You have to learn how you learn, and you work in the way that's best for you. If it takes a bit longer, that's okay. I've just written a book, and it takes me longer to write than it does other people, but that's okay, because I agonize over every sentence. I'll read it over and over and over again to make sure I've got all the words that I want, and to make sure that it's structurally sound and the punctuation is correct. I'll agonize over a sentence for about 15 minutes before I move on, which is a real pain, to be honest. But it's just learning how your brain works, and everyone's brain is different. We all cope with different things. It's just, you have to kind of understand that, and I think you have to go through different trials if you're dyslexic to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of build on it from there.
That sounds really interesting, and I understand that writing issue. It's something that I struggle with, but also have to do. Whether it's articles or writing proposals or whatever, and you or even books, and as particularly books, of course, you have to write lots. And so because I struggle with it, my partner a couple of years ago put me on a writing course, and it was one of the best things I did. It was just a day, but it really did open things up for me, because the guy who ran this course, who was a well-published author, he said this great thing about writing. And he said, if you're struggling with it, which so many people do, even professional writers, suffering from writer's block, the thing to do, and it seems counterintuitive, is just to write and just keep going forwards, and don't do what you do, which is like, agonize over every sentence. Like you say, everybody has their own way, but he said, don't write 2 paragraphs and go back and try and edit, because you'll never go forwards. Even if you think what you're writing isn't very good, just keep going forwards, because then you go on a journey that takes you places that you might never have gone if you just keep going back and that sounds rubbish, I'll change this. No, just keep going forwards. And in many ways, I actually stole this so I run photography workshops on Hampstead Heath, and I thought this is a really good problem solver, because many people also who come on my workshops, you take them to a beautiful forest and they're actually a little bit stuck. They don't know what to photograph. So the thing to do is just start taking pictures. And if you take, 10, 20, 30 pictures, don't take 1 and 2 and then go back and look, and go on a journey, take 10, 20, 30 pictures, and then you'll have a body of work that you then can start to go back. And I think it's the same with writing, that if you can keep momentum, if you can keep going forwards, then you will improve, and just go through that experience of having that almost brain dump, write on the paper and get things going. And then, you'll be surprised sometimes at stuff that you come out with. So, we're going to talk about your book in a bit. I'm really excited to get a copy, particularly at the moment, because I've just acquired a small piece of land. Who does that, right? In London. I mean, when I say small, it's tiny. It's on the allotment where I photograph my foxes. and it's a bit of derelict land at the edge of the allotment that you can't grow anything on. And they just said, does anybody want to take charge to have a wildlife garden or do something? And I just put my hand up straight away. So I'm going to start this in a couple of weeks. So your book's going to be very handy.
What an amazing opportunity, though, to get there completely next to allotments, which are really great for wildlife. So that'd be a fantastic project.
It's going to be really, really good. Yeah. So I've got these ideas of doing, planting native hedges and, of course, lots of wildflower seeds. It's south facing, which is really great. It'll get a lot of sun. There's some people that want to plant fruit trees in there. So it should be a really good, fun project.
Great. You have to do some filming of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely going to document it for sure.
Great.
So speaking of filming, photography, from quite a young age, this is a photography podcast. I was thinking you're also kind of like my ideal guest now, the way this podcast has evolved into conversations about conservation as well as photography. But you also, and of course, I'm sure under Chris's influence, started taking pictures from a young age, and you won an award at quite a young age.
Yeah, I think I got given a disposable camera around age 10. See what you can do with that. So, Chris had his big fancy camera, and I was just, wanted to try it out. So I got given one of these, really old rubbish ones that, inevitably chuck away. And I think he kind of got them developed. And I think I had to nag him a lot to get them developed, but he did it in the end. And he thought, okay, I can compose relatively well. So ended up kind of getting a small digital camera, and it kind of built up from there, really.
So you did start on film?
No, didn't start on film. Never gone on film. No, I've always been a digital camera user. So yeah, it kind of just started, and because I've travelled a lot with Chris, every time that he went and led a tour, or every time he went out filming, if he could, he would always take me with him. He used to run a production company, so it used to be quite good in that I could just join on these amazing trips, and we'd travel around the world together for a really long time. So because of that exposure to those amazing environments and those incredible animals, it was a great opportunity to photograph them. So I started taking photos of everything from the age of 10 onwards. And I think I won the under 12s RSPCA Young Photographer of the Young Photographer of the Year category. That was in 2007, I believe.
Wow, that's a lot. I was hunting around for that photo on the internet. I couldn't find it. What's the picture of?
Oh, I can send it to you. It's two gannets. It was they're diving into the water from Bass Rock.
Oh, brilliant!
And we went out on a boat, and photographing on a boat is never easy because it's really tricky because it's all wobbly all the time. So it's hard to get a sharp image. But I managed to get one of two kind of coming out of the water at exactly the same time, opposite sides, with fish in their mouth.
Nice. Well, look, if we can get it, we can put it up in the links on your page, and so people can have a look.
Sure. Yeah.
That's superb. And then, I mean, the two kind of go hand in hand, I think, don't they? If you love animals, wildlife, and having wildlife experiences, documenting it is kind of the next best thing. I always find experiencing it is the best thing. Always, sometimes cameras can just get in the way of the real enjoyment and the experience of it, but when you're out there in it trying to capture photos of it, obviously is a really, really hard thing, but it's such a rewarding thing to do, when you get it right, and that takes a lot of time and perseverance.
I take thousands, absolutely thousands. Every time I go out, I don't come back with any space on any of my cards, because I'll take thousands and thousands of images in the space of a few hours, and I'll come home and there might be one if I'm lucky, and
that's the way it goes.
That's a good day. That's a really good day. I'm so self-critical of my images that it's really tricky to find one that I like. I think that's the same with every photographer. You can take so many images, but it's just the tiniest little angles and lighting that make the world a difference. So it's it's a labour of love, and it's a love-hate relationship. But it's it's one that I could never give up, because I think it's such an important tool for conservation, and to showcase what that snapshot of time, what the world is like in that period of time, what that species is doing, and just to kind of share stories. It's such a intimate snapshot of that area that it's a great way of communicating with people, because with photographs you don't you're not conflicted to the boundaries of language. You know, a photograph can mean many different things to many different people, but you know, wherever you're from in the world, if you show a photograph and you can elicit an emotion or a thought or a concern in some cases, then you can ignite this spark and hopefully get people to engage in conversation, and most importantly in action. So for me, photography is a really important tool, and it's something I love doing creatively, but it's also something that I think is one of the most important things in terms of contemporary conservation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And did you have any formal training in it? Did you study at all, or did you literally just pick up a camera and well, I know you did that when you were very young, but you just learned by doing?
Yeah, just learned by picking up and giving it a go. Obviously, I had Chris there to teach me. I remember we went on a trip to Antarctica when I was 11, I believe, and I've got this is when I was really learning how to work one of these kind of bigger DSLR cameras. And I remember we were lying just kind of down the slope, looking up at a skua on her nest. And I remember he was to the left of me, and we were both lying still for what, you know, for an 11-year-old felt like an eternity. But he was just like, you know, keep your eye there, finger on the shutter. You know, if you lie here and she's not doing anything now, she's going to do something in a minute. So you have to lie still and just wait. So we were waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden, another skua flew past, and she got up and stretched her wings out. So for you know, hours of lying there waiting, we'd both done this together, and both got similar shots, obviously next to one another. But it's still one of my favourite photos because it was one of the earliest, better photos that I took, and it has, you know, it kind of reminds me of, you know, how he taught me to photograph, and one of the most amazing, life-changing trips. So yeah, and I was just lucky that I got it sharp. So
it's always the way. Yeah, the panic. Is it sharp? Is it sharp? Yeah. What a lovely story, and like what a brilliant scene, and what a great mentor as well. I mean, I know, you know, Chris is highly critical of his own work as well, and I think it really is the best way to be. You know, the more ruthless you are editing your own work, the better your portfolio is going to be.
Yeah, we're quite proud.
So how does it?
We're highly competitive, highly competitive. Recently, we've been out photographing the badgers, kind of just a few miles down the road from the house over lockdown. And yeah, we kind of took turns going out because obviously we don't want too many people there. They're incredibly sensitive to smell, but they were incredibly willing to come up quite close, probably too close actually, because they would come up and their noses would be literally in your lens. And it was amazing. It was incredible, and it was a really special group of badgers because they had different genetic coloration. So they were altruistic and leucistic, and also white and pink badgers, which were incredible. And yeah, Chris had gone to try and take some photos, and we, you know, swept up all the leaves and cut down the branches to make sure there's minimal disturbance. And he came back, and you know, he got some good ones. I went out and got a really good one, and he was really upset for quite some time. So that spurred him on then, because then he spent the next week pretty much living there. And he came back with some of the best badger photos I've seen, and I'm still quite upset by it.
Brilliant. A good bit of healthy competition, I think. Yeah.
We're critical of one another, but also, you know, very supportive, which is great.
That's brilliant. And how now, with all the projects that you're working on, and, you know, many different fronts, you know, doing your own films and presenting, you know, how do you find time for photography, and how do you work as a photographer? You know, I know you say you go out and take thousands of pictures, but do you think about projects, or are you just going out and practicing? You know, what are your methods when you're photographing?
I always like to think about it before I go. I like to have an image in mind if I can, so something to kind of aspire to. It really does depend. It's quite tricky in terms of timing. Kind of in the last few years, I have had less time than I wanted to go out and spend taking photos, because it's something I really do to enjoy, and I go and do it to wind down and relax. So I haven't, you know, been able to do too many big photography projects recently, which is a shame. But when I do have a project in mind, I kind of think about how does anything need setting up. And the thing is, I think when you're setting up a scene or there is something that you're putting in place, it's always really important to be honest that you're doing that. So whether you're putting a branch, which is going to be, a good place for a bird to come and sit, or whether you're going to, I don't know, an organisation and it might be a captive animal, or we've got these amazing kind of boards which we create and we stick beads on them and put them in the background to create bokeh, essentially. So all these kind of tricks and things is really great, and I like being creative and seeing how far I can push things. But you've also got to be honest about if it's a bit slightly artificially set up.
Definitely, because you're going to really piss off the purist the wildlife photography community is, wow, you better do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got this kind of mindset on it, is that for me, photography is like an art form. And there's one thing you can do kind of there's pre and post production changes, obviously. And I think as long as you're open about what you've done to manipulate that image or manipulate that situation, it's fine. And I think actually pushing those boundaries isn't a bad thing so much. I think it's actually can be really incredible, and it's amazing what you can do, in your camera, and it's amazing what you can do in, post production programs, to kind of manipulate things like change the lighting or remove a naughty twig. There are so many naughty twigs. Or to, there's a bit of or something to remove a black dust spot or something. I don't mind that, but it's I like to go in with a clear idea of what I'm after and then try and work towards it. I think you spend less time then. You kind of got a narrow objective, and it's just easier to get what you like. Otherwise, if I went out kind of aimlessly wandering around, I'd spend ages getting 50 photographs of a nice leaf and some light, and then I'd get distracted by another subject, and then I'd be all over the place. But if I go out with a singular focus, then I know what I'm after, and I'll stick on it for a few hours, and then I'll get a better shot in the end rather than kind of just wandering around.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think also what you were saying about pushing the boundaries, it's important. I mean, if you look at what's being awarded in the major competitions currently, compared to 10 years ago, is a huge change in the creativity, the creative side of photography, which I think is amazing. 10 years ago, it was mostly long lens, beautiful portraits of animals, and now you're having all sorts of camera trap photography. And of course, the message is changing as well. It's becoming a lot more conservation focused, what's being exhibited and shown in these competitions. And then I think on top of that, with using the word manipulation, that question that you get asked all the time, do you Photoshop your pictures? And the answer is that you have to if you're going to do any kind of changes to them, whether it's just make a small JPEG to email out or a larger image to produce a print or a book. It has to go through some form of processing. And my approach to it is that Photoshop can't make a bad picture look good. You have to take a really, really well exposed, pin sharp picture showing great behavior or whatever it is before you even enter into making any changes or adjustments. If you get good source material, then I like to use the word optimize, rather than manipulate. I think that sort of sounds a bit more positive.
I entirely agree with that, 100%. I think when you're talking about manipulating Photoshop, you kind of imagine this kind of cut and stick approach where you're getting a background, you're using maybe like another photo of an animal in the most incredible kind of pose, and you're sticking it in, and then you're sticking another, and something that's incredibly artificial and doesn't even exist. But I think I like that kind of optimizing an image, because you're making the best of what it is, and it's already good, but you just need to enhance a few images. And particularly in the modern day of social media, it's important to do that, to stand out. And you have, I kind of have different edit strategies. So if I'm putting something on Instagram, for example, there's very different edit criteria then will be entered into a competition, or will be used in prints or something like that. I feel like on social media things are enhanced a lot more. You see a lot of photographs where the saturation is boosted up, probably way too far. Things are burnt out, and it's a very different kind of thing. But that it's interesting. I mean, I don't like doing that very much at all. It's like I make the minute details, but you can see definitely on Instagram there is the tendency to really over enhance, I'd say, and those images are really popular. So you can see, it works in some ways, but I don't. Yeah, it depends. I think it's personal preference. I don't do that to my images, but it does work.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about you as the presenter, and obviously you have this great kind of training with photography from a young age, and your interest in zoology. And did you have kind of in mind or a dream about becoming a presenter? Was that something that you knew you wanted to do before you studied zoology, or did it come about
Not
later?
specifically. I never went into it thinking that I, wanted to be a presenter very much. I just wanted to be in the best position possible to reach the biggest audience in order to start conversations and make some significant change. I think, I always grew up in and around film crews. I was quite used to cameras and the kit and how film crews work and how edit process happens and how films come together. So for me, that was always something that, because I had that background knowledge, I was always kind of drawn to, and I always really enjoy being part of that process. I think for me, it kind of came about because I spent quite a long time. I spent 5-6 months living in China, working with bears there. That had been rescued from the bear bile industry, and I was volunteering out there. And I came back from that trip, and I got a message from a friend of mine, one of my absolute heroes and mentors, and just an incredibly good friend and person, Ruth Peacey, who was at the time working for the BBC on a project called Undercover Tourist. And they needed another kind of story. And she asked if I had any ideas. And I'd said, well, I've just come back from this bear place, talking about kind of traditional medicine and the cruelty that these bears have to suffer to be kind of milked from their bile, from their gallbladders. So I kind of said, well, why don't we go and do a story on that? And then within 2 weeks, I think I was on a plane and out presenting that. So it kind of just evolved that way. That was back in 2017. And I've been behind the camera doing things. I've helped in different productions. I've also been in front of it. And it's kind of just evolved, really.
Yeah, and that I watched that film this week. It's pretty tough watching. It's amazingly well put together. I mean, you said it in the beginning that this was incredibly low budget in terms of you shooting a lot of stuff on smartphones and using GoPros, and but there's a real edginess to it. It's I mean, we'll put a link up to it on your page so people can watch it. It's really, really good. And actually on that, I had a question. People should just go and watch the film because it's brilliant. But the kind of the goal of that film was, is an investigative piece, and to try and expose what was going on. And you keep mentioning through it that this is an illegal, this is illegal in Vietnam where you were filming. And I wondered if there was did anything come from the work that you were doing? I mean, I know you did some work with Animals Asia, but was anything? Was there any result of the film, any positive result, about the bear bile farming industry?
I think it really helped kind of boost people's awareness of the issue. A lot of people had no idea that bears are used in this way. And just to kind of give everyone a bit of a background, it's Asiatic black bears in particular, also Tibetan browns and sun bears as well, but primarily Asiatic black bears, or moon bears as they're known because they've got this beautiful crescent across their chest. But they are sometimes taken from the wild, depending on the country. There's different practices. Taken from the wild, they're kept in cages. Their lifespan's up to 30 years. They can spend 30 years in a cage, and they are, well, there's different methods, but they basically remove the bile from the gallbladder, and the bile is a digestive fluid, and it is used in traditional Chinese medicine. It's also used as an aphrodisiac. It does have anti-inflammatory properties, which is the issue, but there are better plant synthetic alternatives available. So it's kind of changing that mindset. And I think, going out there to expose it was really good because I wanted to build the awareness in the UK, because I really wanted to help support the charity Animals Asia, which you mentioned before, and they were the people that I was volunteering with when I was out in China. And I'd say kind of it's their work that has done the most amazing thing. They're one of my favourite charities. They've done so much work to end this awful trade. And also they work on other things as well. They do kind of work against circuses and against the dog and cat meat trade as well. And they have really turned the tide on this. And it really varies from country to country. So as you said, in Vietnam, it is illegal to milk bears for their bile. although it's legal to keep bears, which is entirely counterproductive because they're a big animal. It's it's a small cage for that animal, but it's, relatively speaking, when you've got a bear in your kitchen, it does take up a fair bit of space, and they are often in people's kitchens or garages or living rooms, actually, in some cases. And so yeah, it's a big loophole there that you can keep them but not milk them. And then in China, it is legal. So it really varies from country to country. And I think a few months after we released the film, we got some really exciting news, and it's all down to Animals Asia and their tireless campaigning. But in Vietnam, they were making it illegal to even house the bears, which was really, really good news. So that's a huge step forward in Vietnam. Of course, there are other issues there because now then the bears there were worth more dead than alive, because you could sell bear paws and you could sell different body parts and the skins. So there was kind of an issue there, and Animals Asia worked really hard to kind of get more sanctuary space to rescue more, so that they didn't end up in that fate, which would be absolutely devastating after all that tireless work. But it's it's a huge step in the right direction, and I think a lot of people, there was a suggestion that bear bile could help cure COVID-19, which was absolutely horrendous, and absolutely no scientific validity to that whatsoever. But that seems to have kind of gone away. So hopefully the industry is reducing, and we are seeing it. Younger generations are much less accepting, because Animals Asia go into schools and they're teaching in the areas where a lot of families do keep bears. So it's getting there, and they're doing some amazing work. They're a fantastic charity, all run by founded by Jill Robinson, who's one of the kindest, most genuine people I've ever met. She's a fantastic conservationist.
Yeah, I think that's you mentioned the the youth movement in countries such as Vietnam. So I spent some time there early last year, with Fauna and Flora International. One of my good friends is the director of the primate program there, and we made a film together. And that was one of the key messages. Were this wasn't about Western NGOs, which of course Fauna and Flora International is, but a lot of their partners are local NGOs. There's a really good one called Green Viet, for example, that do a lot of work around primate conservation. So these are Vietnam founded organizations run by Vietnamese, doing lots and lots of education work. And there's a place called Son Cha, a reserve that's actually I think it's still an active military training ground, but it's right on this peninsula, close to the city of Da Nang, and they have oh my god, I had a total mind blank. Red Duke langurs, yeah. So they have lots of a big population of red-shanked Duke langurs there, which are just such beautiful primates. There's a sort of 1,000 or so. So they're endangered, not critically endangered. Most primates in Vietnam are critically endangered. It's pretty sad. But right on the edge of this reserve, there's this amazing education center, run entirely by young Vietnamese people. And I think that with the movement, and of course Vietnam's it's a booming economy. It has been booming for the last 10 years. And so you have this rise of middle class, and that's also brings problems in terms of resorts and development and housing and cars and all this infrastructure that's being built. But you also have people that are passionate about their own natural heritage, and I think that's really important. And particularly, worldwide, is getting local people interested in what they have and interested in wanting to protect what they have because they know it's special.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so important, is kind of local communities taking ownership of their fantastic natural resources. And I think it's an amazing thing, and that needs to be kind of promoted more. You do see quite a lot of the time, big Western NGOs come in, or people come in and tell the stories, but should it be them telling it? Should be celebrated in that culture and by those people. So it's I think things are changing in that respect as well, which is actually really good to see. You're seeing it kind of more and more in mainstream media, so hopefully things keep going like that. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's come up quite a bit in conversations now, particularly with the pandemic, is do we really need to send film crews out to Brazil? What about local Brazilian film crews? Do we need to send them film crews out to Southeast Asia? There are perfectly adequate, good, young photographers and filmmakers who are living locally, and you're thinking about carbon footprints, and the local message is really gaining traction right now, and I think that is definitely for the better.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's really exciting. I'm really, I love those conversations, and I think they are, fantastic. It's fantastic that things are moving in that way, because, to kind of use that and reduce carbon footprint, as you say, but also get different perspectives as well. And you can still be amazing in that respect, is the kind of add more diversity into the output of media, I think would be fantastic.
No, absolutely. One of the things I was thinking, just while you were talking there about presenting and looking at the kind of the results, is I sometimes get really frustrated when you bombarded with lots of negative news and biodiversity on a downward spiral. It is kind of hard to maintain a positive attitude, but hearing that story about your work and then with Animals Asia, is that like, okay, so what difference did it make? Well, you were there and you made a short film, and it did some awareness raising. It's probably hard to measure it, but actually what it is you're a small piece of the bigger puzzle, and collectively, with good science, with good NGOs, with good filmmakers and presenters, it's all part of a kind of groundswell of trying to make change. And even though it's hard to quantify, you have to just keep going forwards, don't you? You can't just bury your head under a pillow, because that's not going to do any good either. But do you struggle with it sometimes? Do you kind of wake up sometimes and whatever, you pick your phone up, hear some more terrible news about the state of nature, you think, God, what am I doing? It's getting worse, and you're putting all this energy in and it's getting worse. So how do you motivate yourself?
It's a struggle, I'd say, every day in some way, shape, or form. It's really hard, as you say, seeing those horrendous statistics or news stories, and it seems like constant bad news after more bad news, and then even worse news, and it just kind of, it's easy to kind of spiral, and it can become really challenging. And then you kind of get onto the mindset of, well, is it ever going to change? It doesn't seem to be changing. Is it worth investing all this much energy and input into it? And then at that point, I kind of have to pinch myself and just say, come on, like, you can never, ever, ever give up on this kind of thing. When you love something more than anything in the world, you're never going to give up on it. And for me, I kind of use that negative energy. I think it's actually incredibly powerful. Um, I use it and I try and turn it into something productive, something meaningful, something, that, okay, that happened today, that's awful. What can I do about it? That's the question. Can you, whether it's simply clicking share on social media and sharing it with your friends and followers, that could amplify the message 100, 1,000, 8,000, 50,000 times, depending on your social circle, your followers, whatever. Whether it's, okay, can I donate? Do I have the funds to donate? And if I can't do that, how can I share the message so that people who might be able to donate can see it? Or can I be active in some sort of way? And I get asked this question a lot. Am I an activist? And if you were to ask me that about 5 years ago, I would have said, well, I don't know. Kind of activism kind of gets I think there's a negative stigma to the word. You think of activist and as Boris Johnson says, uncooperative crusties, that kind of thing. So, but my mindset on, of course I'm an activist. I've always been an activist, and I'm incredibly proud to be one. And I think anybody who has any kind of interest in nature or photography or film or anything like that is an activist. Everybody who is active in one way, shape, or form within their environment is an activist. Whatever label you like to put on it, it's the case. So it might be that you want to go and join Extinction Rebellion and go to the extreme side of it and, get arrested, which you don't have to do with Extinction Rebellion. There's only, a few people that are willing to do that in comparison to the army behind them that is there to support and kind of teach and just join in the rebellions. Or you can, put some native wildflowers in your garden and put a hedgehog hole in your fence. that is still activism. You're still being active, and all those steps should be celebrated. And I think it's kind of changing the mindset of, well, I'm only one person, what I do isn't going to make a difference. And that is the most dangerous mindset in conservation. It's the most dangerous thing that we all think is, they're too big, I'm too small. And that can't be the case. It can't be allowed to continue like that, because collectively our voices are so incredibly powerful. If we want to steer in a direction as consumers, then the people making the products or driving the industrial side of things will eventually follow. But it's our voices that matter. It's clicking on that share button that matters. It's donating that matters. It's starting conversations, and just realizing that you as an individual absolutely can make the world of difference. And yeah, we need to start talking more about that, and encouraging and empowering one another in that situation to become more active, to stand up and say, yeah, I'm an activist. Today I put a bee hotel, or yeah, I'm an activist. I went and joined this protest movement. Whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with, it's brilliant. But just wake up tomorrow morning. If you see something bad on the news, do something differently to counteract it.
Well, Megan, you put that brilliantly and so succinctly. It's fabulous information, and yeah, I think it is so important, because I think we can tend to, because we care about it and we love the natural world and we want to do everything that we can to protect it, it can also become a burden. But you're right, it ought not to be, and you don't have to go and glue yourself to the Home Office. Like you say, you can really do, you can really do, yeah, you can do, and yeah, exactly. And that phrase, doing your bit, it is important. And you only have to go back a few years, and the banning or now charging of plastic bags, that has had a huge effect. People are no longer just getting plastic bags willy-nilly and just throwing them away. And there are so many things like that. I think the rise of Extinction Rebellion is a really positive one, with especially with all the satellite groups just here in our local park. There are meetings, and that kind of organization is really, really powerful. And actually, a question I wanted to ask you, because obviously I interviewed Chris Packham back in February, and this was right at the crunch time of you guys launching Wildlife Rebellion. So, of course, then the pandemic came, and it seemed to put a bit of a stop to everything. So where are you at with that now? Actually, and first of all, I shouldn't assume that everybody's heard of Wildlife Rebellion. So if it's still happening, maybe talk a bit about it and let me know where you are with it now.
Yeah, it's very much still happening. So Wildlife Rebellion is essentially, it is a movement, but it's focused on biodiversity loss. When you look in the news and you look in different media outlets, it's all news about climate, which is incredibly important, of course, but it also goes hand in hand with biodiversity loss. So we wanted to bring in that aspect of it too into the conversation. So we are primarily looking at that, but we kind of have a slightly different method in terms of a rebellion. We're still very much a rebellion. We're still definitely going to be a little bit cheeky, but everything that we do is going to be within the law, and it's going to be kind of like a family-friendly activism, I suppose. And we, our aim is to kind of encourage people to be active within their environment. So if you're not comfortable yet joining Extinction Rebellion, that's okay. You don't have to be, but come and join us. We'll, make sure that everything, all the activities, all the actions are going to be legal and authorized. We'll get, whichever location our actions are in, we'll have, agreements that we're allowed to be there and allowed to do it. So, you can be safe in that knowledge. But what we'll be doing we'll have a kind of a cheeky element to it, and hopefully drive for more political systematic change, which is what we all really need. So it's highlighting biodiversity loss and encouraging people to be more active. And if they kind of build their confidence in activism with us and they feel like going on to Extinction Rebellion, fantastic. If they want to kind of hang around with us or take it off and do their own Wildlife Rebellion groups locally, that's even better. So that's kind of the premise behind it. But we were planning to launch on the day that lockdown was announced.
Couldn't have been worse timing.
Not the best timing. We had, I think, 3 campaigns that were ready to go. We just needed to press the green button. and we had to put them on hold because some of them were, as I said, we are being a bit cheeky here with some of our ideas, and in that at that point when our government was incredibly, well, they still are, um, concerned with COVID and the stress on the NHS, everything else, we didn't feel like it was politically correct to be adding to that stress, or it wasn't the right time for us to be doing that. So we put the brakes on it for a little bit, and we're kind of constantly talking still, judging what the climate's like and seeing when we can start things back up and we can reshuffle campaigns so that we can ease back into it and not go in necessarily. We weren't going to go in too hard, obviously, with family friendly activism, but we were going to go in and be a little bit naughty, because it is a rebellion after all, and also it's fun, isn't it, being kids love that kind of stuff, going in and being a bit cheeky.
Yeah, of course it is. And how did any of the civil rights movements progress without being, I mean, more than a little bit cheeky? But yeah, that's the whole point of activism, isn't it? It's like you're standing up for something that you feel is inherently wrong and that you want to make change. So yeah. Being cheeky sounds like being quite polite.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to kind of build people's confidence. I think the question is, and this is what when I talk about Extinction Rebellion or any kind of rebellion, it always comes down to this. And when you're breaking rules or breaking the law, depending on which factor you're going for, what it comes down to is, at what point does it become morally just to break the law or break the rule if that rule or law is entirely wrong? At what point do you have a moral responsibility? We're learning all the time, we are evolving all the time, and sometimes the legislation doesn't keep up with that. So at what point, to get that change, to kind of get the attention onto those issues, at what point do you need to break that rule, break that law in order to do that? And I think Extinction Rebellion have in the most part done it very well. They've done it incredibly well in terms of bringing up the conversation. I've had conversations with my granddad about it, who would never be talking about climate change. I've had conversations with, I've overheard things on the train about people, and these conversations wouldn't have started without them. So, and Wildlife Rebellion certainly wouldn't have done, and all the branches, Ocean Rebellion now, there's Animal Rebellion, which focuses on animal agriculture. There's all these kind of branches of rebellions which are really exciting, so you can kind of join in and out of, well, as many as you like, but they kind of all interweave. You've got Indigenous rebellions, you've got Muslim rebellion, you've got all these amazing kind of groups that you can go and join. It's very inclusive and a very, actually, quite an interesting place to be involved in.
Yeah, I think people are fast realizing that business as usual is just not sustainable.
Yeah, it's something that Chris says is it's business as usual is bad business.
Yeah, that's a great phrase.
I think it works quite well. So we need to adjust our way of thinking and adjust our actions, and we've proven that we can do it. Look how quickly we have adapted to COVID. Jobs which you couldn't possibly work from home at, now everyone is working from home. We've been able to change and use the resources effectively, change our mindsets to deal with that. So it shows how resilient we are when we need to be. But we don't want to get to a point where we need to be resilient to protect ourselves against climate change, because we won't win. So we need to be a bit more forward thinking and put those precautions in place now so that we have a fighting chance.
Megan, time is flying. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours, but I did want to cover quickly because, okay, Wildlife Rebellion was put on hold, but that didn't stop you guys getting creative and putting content out there, and you started the Self-Isolating Bird Club back in, was it March you first started that?
Yeah, I think so. It feels like a lifetime ago, but yeah.
Can you talk a little bit to the listeners about that and how it started and where it is currently?
Yeah, so Self-Isolating Bird Club was kind of, it started off quite small, just as a Facebook Live that we did from the garden, because Chris and I, when I moved in with Chris to work together in lockdown, so that worked out quite well. And he started, noticing spring arriving around the garden and taking a lot of joy and comfort from that. So he thought it'd be a great idea to do a Facebook Live and share that joy and just talk about, I think it was Celandines actually was the first one that he did. And so he started doing them twice a day, just kind of lives and sharing, what plants were coming up, what birds were singing. And then he went to work, so I took over for a little bit. And then we came back together and we started doing them as a duo. And it was just a case of sharing the spring around the country, basically, because we were in a place which was really hard to kind of connect with people. So we thought it'd be really nice to kind of have a community of nature lovers where all the content is entirely positive. There was no bad news. It was all really nice conservation stories. We followed CJ7 and Osprey, who was waiting for a mate in Poole Harbour, hoping it was going to be the first time that they'd been breeding down south of England in like over 200 years. Unfortunately, it wasn't the year, but the nation got gripped by CJ7 and her story. So we, used live cameras, and we got contributors from all around England and in fact the world. We had India, we had South Africa, we had live guests, Michaela Strachan, we've had Yolo, Hannah Stitful, everyone came on, yourself even. We had, videos from you and your foxes, Matt, which was fantastic. And it was just to kind of give people a bit of comfort and a bit of hope, and it's built in this most amazing community of nature lovers on Facebook. We've got, a fantastic people having those important conversations, and we're doing them now. It was every day, and we now doing them every Friday. But yeah, we're going to see. We've got a bit of thinking to do in terms of what the future of South Africa.
I mean, that's you've created yourself a bit of a problem now. You've got a big following. People are expecting to get all of this great content. You can't stop now, can you?
Well, no, we may have to consider putting things on pause a little bit, because we're going into autumn watch season. So we will see. We're going to have conversations about that and see what happens. But whatever happens, it's definitely not the end of South Isolating Bird Club. It's been the most amazing thing that's come out of lockdown, and the most amazing community, and it's been amazing to see everyone support one another.
Yeah, and it also seemed nice that you weren't, this is one of the wonders of, one of the positive aspects of social media, that you're, not really restrained by, any kind of governing body. This is just like you guys putting this stuff out there. And I really paid attention to, you had lots of topics around mental health issues, the Black Lives Matter movement, and also a lot of young people, which I thought was brilliant. And it was really great to see those stories across big swathes of society. And was that something that you talked about, or did it just kind of evolve naturally that you wanted that varied content?
I think it was just really important to talk about. I think we all 100% agreed on it. So it's a team of four. It's myself and Chris, and of course the absolutely amazing tech wizard Fabian Harrison, who produces it all from his house in Norwich, and Kate Crocker as well, who is fantastic at sorting out all the social media for us. And so all four of us, it was just a given. There was no kind of question of it. Young people need to have that platform. Their voices are so powerful and important, and there's some incredibly knowledgeable young naturalists out there. Indy Green does a lot of videos for us, and he's fantastic. You've got Dara McNulty, you've got just like this whole host. It's just Kabir Cool. You've got the most amazing people, Holly Gilband up in Scotland, and they are so empowering to listen to. We're captivated by them, so we wanted to kind of give them a platform so that they could captivate the nation, which they have done. And Black Lives Matter was a really important moment, I think, this year, and we wanted to talk about Black Birders Week, which was it kind of all stemmed from the incident that happened in New York, which was a horrible incident of horrendous racism. Against a black birder who was just out birding, and because Black Birders Week came, and it was phenomenal. It was amazing, talking about diversity in the nature sector, which is a conversation again that we need to be having more of. There's not enough access and inclusion, and there needs to be that. So for us, we wanted to cover those stories, and we wanted to give a platform to those voices, because they're much more powerful and important than our own.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's great. And that's the thing about having those conversations about diversity, but then putting them into action. I listened to a few podcasts myself, and one of them is the Football Weekly podcast on The Guardian, and the host there, he had, they regularly have women on there talking about football, but the majority are white male journalists. And around the Black Lives Matter movement, it sparked conversations on their podcast about it, and they had a black journalist on there, and he talked, well, these things just have to be put in. So you have to, when you make your program, you have to say, okay, 1 out of every 4 of your shows, you have to have a black journalist on, and that's basically how these things have to work. It's great talking about it. It's great having the conversation, but we need action if we're going to back up the diversity conversation.
We have to open those floors. It's we have to open those conversations and open those arenas for everyone, no matter where you're from, no matter what your background is. Everyone needs that to have their voice heard. Everyone, should have that. That should just be a given. So, those are important conversations, and we need to have a lot more. I think in some ways it's got better, and in other ways it absolutely hasn't. And we need to be having more of those conversations and be more inclusive, because it's our diversity that makes us strong. It's our diversity of ideas. It's our diversity of different people with different kind of backgrounds coming at things from different angles. That is the most important thing. So whether you're talking about sport, I've been listening to George the Poet, who's absolutely incredible, amazing. If you haven't listened to George the Poet, go listen to him. I've been listening to a bit of him when I was travelling around Scotland, and he says it so well, and I think we need to be more open and more inviting.
So you've got Autumn Watch coming up.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. So you made your a big debut on Spring Watch this year. That must have been pretty exciting for you.
It was great. Yeah, it was. I never expected to. If you said a year ago that I would have been on Spring Watch, I would have kind of laughed and said, "Oh, no way."
Yeah.
But it happened. It did happen, and it was the most amazing experience. It was surreal doing it from home. I'd never done live TV. All the TV that I'd done prior to that was all kind of pre-recorded stuff.
Yeah, the pressure was on, right?
Yeah, this was different. You have to get used to people talking in your ear. You have to get used to quite a different way of working, but obviously minimal crew because of COVID as well. So we only had 4 people on site with us, which was tiny in comparison to the kind of plus 100 easily.
Amazing, yeah. And what a technical feat it was pulling it off in the way that you did.
Massively, to all those live elements, presenters around the country dealing with all of that. I mean, I'm not very well versed in the technical side of it, but however they did that was incredible. It was a huge triumph, I think, and it was just amazing to see people's reactions to it, because I think people really enjoyed it, which was great to see. It's
such a popular program, isn't it? I think people are devastated, that, oh God, we're all locked at home here. If Spring Watch doesn't happen, then we may as well just give up. So yeah, BBC had to pull it out of the bag, and they did. And it's really funny, just Googling your name now, and it's all the kind of broadsheets, who is this Megan McCubbin? And and then of course you go on a program like Spring Watch and millions of people are watching it, so the spotlight is shining right on you, and then you're kind of, oh no God, you're at the mercy of the tabloid press. But it seems like they're on your side.
I hope so. You never know which way it's going to go. I think with such a beloved show like Spring Watch, it's people hold it really close to their heart, so any change is something that is really kind of difficult. So the change in format, I mean, there's lots of changes this year, lots of guest presenters, which was great. Ellie Harrison, Gordon Buchanan, Steve Backshaw, myself, and doing it all from home as well. So it was lots of changes, but so it could have been, it could have gone one way or the other, I suppose, but it went really far in the right direction, which was amazing.
That's great. So you don't know yet whether you've been asked back for Autumn Watch, or can you talk about it? You have to wait and see. Okay. I can see Megan, everyone. She's got a sparkle in her eye. I'm guessing it's a yes. But anyway, look, I won't grill you on that anymore. We've been going for over an hour now, and I wanted to ask you a couple more questions before I let you go. And just going back, I think your career path seems to be quite I suppose common now in terms of people wanting to get into this kind of field of whether it's photography or conservation or presenting, filmmaking. I interviewed Roxy Furman last year, and she's now studying at Bristol and taking a similar path. And this kind of, I would say, jack of all trades, but just mixing everything up. Is this the way that I get a lot of messages, after these podcasts, or graduates, messaging me, either asking to be an assistant or just giving advice. And one of the things, I guess I'm more of a pure photographer. Yeah, my income is very broad, but with publishing and have an agency, and there's no one thing I live off of. But I would just say, if someone asks me what I do, it's kind of easy. I'm a photographer, but it's not easy making a living. So how do you kind of encourage someone, to do what you do and to get in it? What would be your advice?
Well, I think having that diversity of jobs and kind of doing a bit of presenting or photography or podcast recording or anything like that is really exciting, because every day is so different. And that's what I love about it, is I wake up and there's no 2 days are ever the same. And it's just like the way it is with wildlife. You go out, you might go into the same wood every day, but it will be entirely different because the things you'll see, the smells, the weather, whatever will make it different. So it is quite an unusual job in that it is. Whenever anyone asks me what I do, I kind of always scratch my head, because it's kind of, well, bit of this, bit of that, bit of over there, bit of over here, and it's it's always quite funny to describe. But I think it's such a great thing to be able to go and do, because if you've got that fundamental love of biology, that fundamental love of animals, you get to spend your whole day pretty much chatting about it. And that's all I want. So instead of boring my family and friends by, I don't know, the wildcats or beaver reintroductions, or I don't know how bees cut half crescent moon shapes in leaves to make the plant flower earlier, rather than going into the detail and boring my family about all that stuff, or barring Chris, obviously, because we'd be nerding out together, but other family members who are interested but not quite so interested, I can go and talk about it on a podcast or on the telly, and I have great fun doing it. So it's my advice would be just kind of get stuck in. If you can, get a camera. You don't need necessarily, start on your phone. That's fine. And because the cameras and the recording systems on that are pretty good. Just give it a go, give it a try, and just start somewhere. Go out and just try and do like a mindfulness moment, perhaps, like they did on Springwatch. Go out and just film things that are beautiful and try and edit them together in a way that's a bit creative and different, and just play around, be experimental, but just don't be afraid to, like your advice on the writing, just get stuck in and give it a go and keep going, because then you will potentially, but most probably, end up with something quite amazing, and you'll build your skills over time. But just don't be intimidated by the different facets of it. Just go for it.
Brilliant. Great advice, Megan. And so what about you? How are you 24 now?
25.
What are your hopes and wishes and dreams for the future? Do you think about what you might want to be doing when you're 35, 45?
I don't know. I'm still very much open to it. I'd love to do a PhD at some point. I'd really love to go and do a PhD. I'm really into kind of big predatory animals, so anything with claws, teeth, and anything like that is fascinating. I've done a lot of work with big cats and sharks and things, so maybe a research project looking at that. And also illegal wildlife trade is a huge passion of mine, so maybe a PhD on something like that. But also kind of science communication. I loved the presenting side of it. I love kind of the research that goes into it. So I'd like to be in a position where I can kind of communicate better to a wider audience about these kind of issues, and potentially kind of help bring about more activism, more change. So that my overarch, as long as I'm kind of making progress in that, in changing mindsets and challenging people's environmental perceptions, then I'm happy with whatever avenue it happens to be.
Megan, thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been great finally getting you on, and we'll certainly put the links up to the Self-Isolating Bird Club, all your social media links. I encourage everyone to follow Megan. She's just very, really active with great stories, and we'll dig deep and find your winning image from 2007, and we'll put a link up to that. And we'll keep the conversation going, and we'll have you on again.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to finally chat.
Brilliant. Thanks, Megan. Take care.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you, Megan. What a fabulous insight into her journey so far, and what an inspiration. campaigning on so many fronts and using all available platforms to get everyone engaged. First of all, I need to mention that I completely forgot to bring up her book again, which is hot off the press and a must purchase for anyone with a love for nature. It's entitled Back to Nature and looks at how we feel about the wildlife outside our windows and how we can connect with it. She's co-written the book with Chris Packham, and it's coming in November. There's a link to it in Megan's podcast page on my website, so please check that out and spread the word. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next month with more great stories from the world's best photographers, conservationists, filmmakers, and much, much more.